Around 80% of AI projects never reach production, and 85% fail to deliver the benefits they promised. Fewer than 40% of companies have consistent executive sponsorship, even though active sponsorship is the single most important factor for success. In this video, I'll walk through what leaders need to understand before they commit to a serious AI transformation, and the 2 leadership shifts that dramatically increase the odds of success. If you're new here, I'm Quinton Hiini, and this is the second episode in the QAI for Business series, which I built from my real-world experience leading global digital transformations and helping companies get measurable value from AI. So the first most critical step before investing heavily in AI is to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself in for. Leading a company through AI adoption, it's not just an IT rollout, it's actually a fundamental shift in how your organization does business, and it impacts technology, data, workflows, but also most importantly, the company's culture. It really is a multi-year investment, and it's filled with all sorts of twists and turns and new technologies, and essentially the whole world is learning how to do at the same time. So because of this, it's super important that leadership asked, are we fully on board with this? Do we have everything we need? Or are there other priorities that need our attention first? It really is critical that leaders know what they're getting themselves in for, because it's quite a significant change and you need to make sure that you're ready for it. Without truly understanding the scope and understanding what you're committed to, the chances of you becoming one of the 80% that fail are very high. So once you're clear on this level of commitment and you understand what you're getting yourself in for, there's 2 fundamental leadership shifts that you should understand. So the first is, as leaders, you need to own and drive the AI transformation. So of course you have a delegated person who's going to be the lead for the transformation, and they'll probably get all the grunt work done and the interviews, write the strategies, the project plans, change management, this kind of stuff. But as leaders, you do need to know that you are an integral part of this, because the way that you lead this and the way that you lead by example determines how the rest of the organization perceives this change. And if you're not leading by example, otherwise parts of the company think of this as optional, and then it starts to collapse from inside. This is particularly important when you're working with middle management, because often they hold the keys to success because they're working with the teams and the people who are doing the work. So I'm going to give you some tips about being more visibly present to this. So the first is, make sure that you're part of major initiatives. So for example, kickoffs. As a leader, when your company starts kicking off major projects, it's really good if the CEO or the C-level sponsors can be involved with this. It gives it the gravitas that it needs and sort of tells the rest of the company how important this is. Making sure to communicate AI progress, for example, in company all-hands meetings or in meeting newsletters, having this kind of update from leadership constantly lets them know that this really is a high priority and that it's really important and it does have the mandate that it needs. Another idea is to make sure that you're sort of sponsoring innovation. So be it hackathons or be it competitions, being visibly part of these and sponsoring and mandating this innovation and the change also sets a really good example for the rest of your team. And it really just sets the tone that this is an organizational transformation, that you're all part of it, and it's not just some optional experiment or playing around with tools. Okay, and so the second shift relates to committing the time and resources for this. I know companies have a lot going on, and to be fair, the AI phenomenon came out of nowhere for a lot of people. I know that a lot of leaders who don't fully comprehend the extent that this transformation needs will underplay it. And so sometimes that comes through in things like allocating budgets, the time, and the level of importance that it needs for this to be successful. So to make sure that you fully understand what you're committing to, I've put together a quick list of some of the things that you should think through. Some of the additional costs, the hidden expenses, and things that consume your time that you need to be aware of. So first of all, data governance, data cleansing, migration, all of this kind of thing. The key with AI is that the quality of the outputs depend on the quality of the inputs, and sometimes organizations have data all over the place, different sources. The investment needed to make sure that this is all set up properly is really quite significant and can take lots of resources. There's also integrating with legacy systems. For example, if you have a new RAG system, is that going to connect with all of your internal systems? What if you have documents or knowledge shared in tools that don't integrate? All these kind of things, and going through the process of checking the integrations is quite time consuming and involves investment. A huge one, and I've got a full video on this, is change management and the way that you communicate with staff. You really can't underestimate the importance of change management here. You need a dedicated change leader. You need to make sure that you're taking this seriously, because there's got to be a lot of built-in resistance that you need to plan for. Enterprise-wide training as well is super important. So there's a lot of compliance tied into training these days, particularly in the EU. But beyond that, you do need to make sure that your company and the people, including leadership, really understand how to get value out of AI and how to use it properly. So things like prompting, how to set up agents, workflows, all this kind of stuff is really important for the whole company. There's also the need to recruit talent as well. So depending on what talent levels you have or people that you have in the organization right now, you're often going to need additional people, perhaps in data or architects or things like this. The other thing is you might need to cross-train people who are in departments that, perhaps their roles are changing. So making sure that you realize that you do need to do some adjustments to resourcing and training, that kind of stuff. And getting people in is also super important. And then there's ongoing maintenance of models. If you're creating your own models and AI tools, you have to think of hosting, you have to think of development, you have to think of ongoing maintenance, all this kind of stuff. And then also compliance. And I know for sure in the EU, this is becoming really heavy now. And there are things like training that needs to happen. There are guidelines, cybersecurity, all of this kind of stuff. You really can't underestimate that, because it really is quite a lot to take on. And sometimes you may need external vendors or people to help with this kind of thing. So ultimately, look, these all add up to a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of commitment. So it is important that you factor in all of these things, that you think through them, that you're really having a good feel about what the cost is for this kind of stuff. Now, I will say there's lots of twists and turns with these. You never know upfront exactly what the costs are going to be. But if you have an idea of the scope, and if you see it as more than just perhaps rolling out AI tools, that you see it as a fundamental organizational change, then you're probably going to be more in the ballpark of what really is required and the kind of investment that's needed for this as well. Also super critical is that, and if you understand this, you're also able to determine the level of return on investment that you want as well. So just to summarize these key points again, leaders, make sure that you know what you're in for, right? And make sure that you're factoring in all of the bits and pieces that are involved in this. It's not just an IT rollout, it's an organizational transformation. Make sure that you're pulling together the initial costs and you're flexible with budgets, this kind of stuff, but you have a sense of just how big this might be. Also, be conscious of build versus buy. So in some instances, it makes more sense for you to buy things off the shelf. It might not necessarily be advantageous to you to build your own LLM. It might be, depending on what your workflow is. However, just be aware of buy versus build as well, and factor that into your decisions. And then the other thing is just making sure that you're really investing in the training and the AI literacy, and that you're really focusing in on teaching your companies how to use this, going beyond what's required and really focusing on how do I get my people and my leaders to get real value out of AI. So once you've got a good sense of what's required from leadership and the structure and the governance and all these kind of things, the next thing that you really want to focus on is how do you get real value and return on investment from your AI initiatives. It's super easy, particularly at the beginning stages, to commit what people call random acts of AI, which is going for the first tool that they see and skipping the critical part, which is making sure that you're connecting AI to value and that you're solving real problems. And so in the next video, I do go into this in more detail, and we focus on human-centered design, how to question people, how to pull together value, and how to map out and prioritize what initiatives you should focus on. So if you've liked this video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And just a quick shout out to our sponsor for today's video, it's Andrew McCulloch, and I'm Kia ora.